and welcome back to Through the Trap Door. I'm Emily.
And I'm Katie.
And this is our podcast where we read you Harry Potter fanfiction.
Yep. How many chapters are we in now? 6.
Yes, this is the 6th. Well, we're going to read the 6th and 7th chapter today. Do you want to tell the people what we're drinking today?
I would love to, since you don't know how to say the winery's name.
No, yeah.
So it was recently Miss Emily's birthday.
Yes, it was.
So I provided the wine today instead of her. So it is from a lovely little local winery called Zarinos. We are drinking their strawberry wine, which has a fancy name that Frangiola Z? I don't know, but it's delicious.
It is fantastic. I love it.
So good. I sent my husband out to get it.
Good choice.
Yep.
Do you have any announcements this week?
Other than the fact that our downloads and listens are through the roof for us, like they doubled.
I know, I'm so excited. Thank you guys so much for listening to our podcast.
We literally love you. And what, 28 downloads in Germany? Hey, yeah. Germany!
20 in Germany. And then we have like, I think 86 in Florida all
Hey,
of a
Florida.
Sudden. I don't know what that's about.
Well, we love you all.
Yeah.
Tweeted us, Facebook group us, email us, tell us where you're from, who you are. We want to say hello.
Send us fan fiction.
Rate us, review us, subscribe to us on iTunes, get us up higher on lists, which probably won't happen, but that's fine.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Just share with your friends.
Oh, yeah, tell a friend about us.
Mm-hmm. Anyone who loves Harry Potter.
Would love this. Also, anybody who wants to listen to two girls ramble at each other while reading fan fiction and drinking wine would also love this.
You're not wrong. This wine is delicious.
It's so good.
This is a little off topic, but I was thinking today, while driving home, listening to our podcast from last week, well, I guess the week before, if you leave this in. Anyway, we were talking about how we often forget Lockhart.
Right.
During our next little break between this story and whatever we pick for the next one, I think I would really like us to find at least 1 or 2 one-shots about Lockhart.
I'm in.
I can only imagine how ridiculous they are.
Because most people forget about him, so I can only imagine that they would be outlandish.
Yeah. I'm kind of excited now that, like, I've had this thought in my mind.
Oh, yeah. This is a good one. We might need to leave a note for ourselves since...
Probably going to have to leave a note somewhere.
We're 6 chapters into 20-something.
I mean, we're making very good progress.
We are. Because what, this is going to be episode 5 of this season?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So, chapter 6, Creevey's Surprise. Harry walked numbly back to the regular part of the school. He thought about going to the library, but then thought the better of it, and headed off to Gryffindor Tower. How was he going to tell Neville that LaSalle was there that night? Was he? Something just didn't seem right. He had to admit that Sirius and Lupin were prejudiced against the Snapes. Perhaps they were too ready to draw conclusions. After all, Harry highly doubted that Dumbledore would allow anyone guilty or highly suspected of committing such heinous crimes to teach at Hogwarts. The more he thought about it, the more Harry doubted whether he should tell Neville. If the news got out that the Snapes had been Death Eaters, and that LaSalle may have been guilty of torturing an Auror and his wife, Dumbledore might be forced to fire them. He remembered when the parents found out about Lupin being a werewolf. It was probably better that he didn't tell anyone about the Snapes, though he did not entirely dislike the idea of getting Snape sacked. "Nimmy Pimmy," he said to the fat lady, and he crawled through the portrait hole. And here come our recording friends.
The puppers. Hello, guys.
"Harry!" Hermione exclaimed upon seeing him enter. His hopes of having a while to sort things out were gone. "You wouldn't believe what we found! Did you find anything out from, Snuffles?" Neville was in the room and gave Hermione and Ron a queer look. Harry stared at them dumbly. He scratched at his head and then forced a shrug. He didn't know much. He couldn't have known much about it because of where he was at the time. Hermione understood and nodded. We did manage to find a few things at the library. She opened up a book. Look, we got a picture of Snape's parents. Ron had leaned in and started flipping through the pages. Nasty set, he commented, stopping and pointing to a very bony and angry-looking couple. They were some of the first supporters of Voldemort. They worked as a team, and they were wanted by the Ministry for several years until they were finally tracked down by a group of Aurors. Look, Neville suddenly pointed out. One of the Aurors who finally caught them was my grandfather, Lawrence Longbottom. Harry found it hard to believe that Neville had come from a long line of Aurors. He was suddenly hit with the realization, if a Longbottom had been responsible for throwing some Snapes in Azkaban, he wondered how close LaSalle had been to his aunt and uncle. They had raised him, had they not? Though, by the picture, they didn't appear to be much of the nurturing type. Did you find anything about why he was raised by his aunt and uncle? Harry asked. Hermione reached for another book. Not exactly. Now this is weird, Ron commented. Claudius Snape, old Snape's father, and LaSalle's uncle didn't have any brothers, only a sister. They all leaned closer over the book. There was a picture of a beautiful woman with black, sparkling eyes and hair. She doesn't look much like a Snape, Ron pointed out. Harry had to agree. She went missing shortly after LaSalle would have been born. We believe she was probably his mother. The Snape family, while old, is extremely small. The two at the school are the only ones left. Harry studied the book and saw why she was in the book. She murdered a Muggle? Hermione and Ron nodded. She was wanted by the Ministry, but never found, Hermione explained. Great family, huh? Ron said. Prisoners in Azkaban. Murderers on the run, Death Eaters, lovely bunch. No wonder why Snape is such a... Harry blocked out Ron's rant. He had noticed something that made his heart slide into his throat. He pulled the book with the picture of LaSalle's mom closer. He read the caption. Nagini Snape, former employee at Department of Muggle Artifacts, is wanted by magical law enforcement for the murder of a Muggle in 1961. She is suspected of being a close follower of you-know-who and is deemed extremely dangerous. Miss Snape is still at large. However, no trace of her has ever been found since the murder. Harry stared hard at the picture, her eyes. As he stared at them, the common room seemed to disappear, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. He had seen them before. Harry? Hermione said after a time. By the look on her face, it seemed worried. Harry, are you all right? Was she ever found? He questioned. Slowly, Hermione shook her head. Do you know something? I know that look, Harry. Have you seen her? Ron asked. Harry pried his eyes away from the picture. How common of a name is Nagini? Hermione pulled the book away from Harry, as if she didn't, he might hurt himself. Not very. I've never run across it until now. Why? Harry wondered what the chances were. No, he was letting Voldemort get into him again. This is crazy. Nothing, he replied. Quit being so paranoid, he told himself. Got up from the table. It's time for dinner. I'm hungry, he said, needing a change of subject. Colin Creevey? Ron said with a moan. Look, Harry, it's your number one fan. He's not going to try out, is he? Harry whirled around and looked with dread as Colin Creevey came marching across the field. He's not going to start that again, Ron commented, pointing to the camera around his neck. Harry rolled his eyes. He was somewhat relieved, however, when Colin didn't stop and just went and sat in the bleachers. Then he waved to his brother, Dennis, who was clutching a broomstick in his hands. Harry thought back to last year at how excited Dennis got at being thrown into a boat by a giant squid. Dennis was smiling broadly, and Harry grinned back as he motioned for him to come over. Okay, Harry explained. Katie and Angelina, I need you to take the quaffle and try your hardest to score a goal. Everyone who's trying out for the position of keeper will take turns at guarding the goals. Harry had to stop. There was a commotion around Dennis Creevey. Listen, I'm explaining. Come on, where'd you get a firebolt, Creevey? Someone said. Harry took interest. A firebolt? Dennis nodded. Professor LaSalle lent it to me. Said I could use it for games if I made the team. He held it up proudly. He said Victor Crumb of the Bulgarias has used this one. The crowd around him became even more rowdy at this. Professor LaSalle lent it to you? Harry said in disbelief. Wait a minute. Fred eyed it suspiciously. Let me get this right. A Slytherin offered to lend a broom to be used on the Gryffindor Quidditch team. He helped me practice. I don't think he's a real Slytherin, Dennis said defensively. Harry didn't wish to comment, so he said loudly, I need everyone who's trying out to line up. You're going to take turns.
Very captain-y, very managerial of you, Harry.
He noticed that Ron had run to be first in line. If Ron didn't do well, he was dreading having to turn him down.
Oh, sad.
Might as well get this over with, he said shakily but smiling. Ron did do well. Very well, in fact. But he was no match compared to Dennis Creevey on a firebolt. Creevey just seemed to become a blur that managed to repel almost every single of Katie and Angelina's shots. Harry stared in wonder and only looked away once when he heard a series of rapid clicks, and he turned to see Cullen taking pictures. For once, he couldn't blame him. Watching Dennis block the quaffle, which the girls had begun to beat at the goals in true earnest, was something that made Harry's mouth hang open and stare. Eventually, they all landed exhausted. Dennis landed near Harry with a wide grin plastered across his face. So how'd I do, Harry Potter? Well, Harry reached up and scratched the back of his head. He'd have to admit that he'd never seen anything quite like it. With hardly a thought, he said, I think you've got it. There was a round of applause after he said this. Only Harry noticed a hurt look cross Ron's face. Ah, Ron, don't take it hard, he heard both Fred and George say. You play better as a beater, like us. You'll be on the team next year after we're gone. It's because of that firebolt, Ron spat. If I didn't have such a crappy broom, he stormed off the field. Harry felt the urge to go after him, but then Professor McGonagall had arrived. Have you found our new keeper already? She asked. It's me, Professor, Dennis exclaimed. Yeah, you should have seen him, Colin boasted. I got pictures. McGonagall just smiled. That's wonderful, Dennis. I hardly expected. Didn't even know you were going to try. Good for you.
Oh, so supportive. I love Minerva.
Me too. Why'd you come out, Professor? Harry asked, remembering last time. I was just interested to see who our new player was going to be. That and Professor Snape will be coming out shortly to talk to you about games and practice schedules. Harry nodded. By the tone of her voice, he sensed that she had come to oversee these happenings. Ah, there he is now. Minerva! How nice to see you out here, LaSalle said formally as he approached the crowd. Harry saw him give a thumbs up to Dennis, and Dennis promptly returned them.
I don't know if I should be happy he's helping Dennis or be concerned.
I feel like I would be happy. Because again, I feel like this author's really trying to make it seem like LaSalle's a bad person. Because, like, all the bad reviews he got from while he was in school, and, like, he was on Voldemort's side. But then I think, like we've talked about before, he may just be, like, a follower.
Right.
Or, like, with the conversation that they had in the headmaster's office.
Like, stop babying me.
Yeah.
I'm not your little brother. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, like, something happened.
And he's sick of living in Snape's shadow. He probably went to Azkaban instead of Snape.
Yes.
Because he probably was like, I'm taking him to take the fall from my big cousin who's been more like a brother to me my whole life. And I think that's going to be revealed, but that's my prediction.
I like it. McGonagall only gave a slight smile and stepped back. LaSalle strode up to Harry. You are the captain, right, Harry? Yes, Professor. I've got the game schedule for you. He leaned his staff against his shoulder and unrolled a piece of parchment. I also need you to sign up for practice times Draco and Miss Chang already have. I still need to find out who the Hufflepuff captain is, however. When's our first game? Harry asked, not at all happy that Slytherins and Ravenclaws had gotten first dibs on practice times. There was also a strange feeling in his chest at the mention of Cho Chang as the new Ravenclaw captain, as well as a pang for the mention of a Hufflepuff captain. Your first game is on Saturday, LaSalle replied, and I was just informed that the Minister of Magic has expressed to me that he would like to take a break with his family and come watch. The team members began to talk excitedly, and Harry felt happy about it as well. But when he glanced up at Professor LaSalle, he noticed that his lips were tight and his eyes especially dark. Who are we going to play? LaSalle looked down at the parchment. Slytherin House. The chatter abruptly ceased, and there was some grumbling. LaSalle didn't notice. He suddenly didn't seem to be paying attention to anything. He only stared back at the castle before tossing the parchment to Harry. Here, fill this out. Try to be considerate of the Hufflepuffs, okay? Drop it off at my office when you've filled it out. With that, he took off at a brisk pace for the castle. Once a distance from the students, he rolled the sleeve of his left arm, took a glance at his forearm before breaking into a run. Harry stared at him briefly, but was forced to turn back to his teammates. And that was the end of Chapter 6. Chapter 7. Angry Scar. Harry and the rest of the Gryffindors were rather glum for the rest of the weekend. Their first match had to be against the Slytherins. Harry's first game as captain was going to be against their greatest rivals. But then again, it would be Draco's first time as captain as well. Draco, annoyingly enough, had taken most of the good practice slots. Harry wanted to complain to Professor LaSalle, but he wasn't there when he dropped off the parchment, and he didn't feel like trying to find him in the staff's quarters.
Well, especially not since you're really not supposed to be in there unless you're going to visit Sirius, Harry.
Yeah.
Like, now that you know where they are, it's not so you can then go complain to people.
Yeah, you can't use that privilege like that. He didn't really think anything of not being able to find LaSalle until Monday morning. They had all been expecting a test in potions and had stayed up late Sunday night studying, preparing themselves for the test, and came in prepared for old Snape's usual snide remarks and pressure. Harry walked in bracing himself, but he got a shock as soon as he looked around. For the first time since he'd been at Hogwarts, Professor Snape was not there.
Oh, dang.
Dumbledore stood at the head of the classroom.
When has Dumbledore ever substituted a class? Exactly. The answer is never.
I was just trying to think of who would take over potions other than Dumbledore.
Fair.
Because you know that Dumbledore could do it. I mean, he wouldn't be as good as Snape, obviously.
Right, because Snape's literally amazing. But we've determined that from our other conversations.
Yes. But, like, I don't know really if any of the other professors would be able to take over.
No, I don't actually think I think you're right.
Maybe Sprout?
Oh, Sprout would be the only one I would think of, but she's the one who she just grew the stuff and then gave it to Snape.
Right. And, like, we don't know a whole bunch about, like, the
outlying professors, or even that much. I mean, maybe Flitwick, but that's because he's Ravenclaw, so he values learning.
Yeah, but see, I feel like he's, like, really into charms and, like...
Well, he is the charms professor.
I know that. But you know what I mean? Like, I feel like, if anything, like, he spent his life, like, learning how to duel and, like...
Yeah, I guess that's true. I never thought about that.
Like, I don't think that, like, I'm sure he thinks potions are important, but I don't think that, like...
Yeah, and I guess the only teacher that they ever really needed a substitute for was Grubbly Plank for Hagrid. And then Snape for Lupin.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, they never really talked about substitute teachers.
'Cause, I mean, they lived there all the time, so...
Right, but I mean, like, people get sick.
They never really talk about anyone being sick in the books, other than when, like, Harry has, like, head injury from when he fell 50,000 feet off his broom.
Oh, yeah, I guess because, you know, potions.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so I wonder if, Poppy,
Oh.
Madame Humphrey.
She probably would have been a good substitute.
Unless, of course, Snape brewed all the potions and then just gave them to her and she just knew how to administrate them.
Which could be. That could also be. Interesting theory. I like it.
Yeah, I'm gonna ride that one.
You may leave as soon as you have finished your exams, Dumbledore said as he handed out the pieces of parchment. Professor Snape informed me that all of the ingredients you will need can be found in your class cupboard. Also, those of you who have Defense Against the Dark Arts later today, your class has been canceled. Harry and Hermione exchanged looks. I hope they're all right, Ron whispered. There was a good deal of whispering, especially from the Slytherin side of the room. Dumbledore was watching them grimly, his arms crossed. Idiots, Harry mumbled. Hermione gave him a questioning look. You can probably guess where the Snapes are, he said so lowly no one else could hear. And I bet you 2 to 1 that a lot of their parents are with them, he said, jerking his head towards the Slytherins. That's probably what they're talking about. And in front of Dumbledore. Not too bright, but good for us. Hermione swallowed and nodded, looking down at her test. Both Snape and LaSalle were seen in the castle the following day, and potions and Defense Against the Dark Arts resumed as usual on Friday. Snape was being as contemptuous as always, seemingly dissatisfied that the Gryffindors did so well on a test while the Slytherins mainly failed. What was unusual was Defense Against the Dark Arts. LaSalle was hideously grumpy. What's more was Harry's scar had suddenly begun to burn.
Oh, uh-oh.
Who's
foreshadowing.
Possessed? I like how you went with foreshadowing and I went with who's possessed.
I also love that we said it like at the exact same time.
Of course.
Oh, man.
Dean Thomas had already been harshly scolded for making a snide comment about Professor Snape. Professor LaSalle had lashed out and given Dean a detention in which he was to report to Filch and had taken points away from Gryffindor. He then turned on the entire class when he had asked them to take out their text and review some questions for owls. The class had gotten used to not using them and had not brought them with them. What do you mean none of you have your books? Professor LaSalle asked angrily at the shock of the class. Harry began to wonder if he had somehow ended up in potions again. LaSalle's voice sounded strangely familiar to Severus's at the moment. You come to class without your books? I can't believe this. How do any of you plan on passing your owls? 10 points from Gryffindor. He paced in front of the classroom, his dark red cape swishing angrily after him. And I am assigning all of you an essay on the best ways to repel a Dementor and a battle with a giant.
Those are 2 very, very different things.
Very different topics. It's going to be at least 3 feet long, and I will take points off for large writing, Mr. Weasley.
Ho ho!
Called out. You're to have it finished by the time you return here on Monday. What? Someone squawked. You can't assign homework over the weekend like that. We've got a Quidditch match tomorrow.
Oh, boo freaking who. You're basically in college.
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest.
Stop being a baby. Do not argue with me, Mr. Thomas. You are already in trouble as it is, LaSalle said in a low hiss that sounded exactly like Snape's. I advise you to shut your mouth for the remainder of class.
Sass.
Harry heard Ron cuss under his breath. Ever since the tryouts, Ron had claimed LaSalle as an enemy for lending Creevey a firebolt. He continued to insist that the broom was cursed. At the moment, Harry thought about it himself. The relationship between the Snapes was currently very clear. He began to turn over all the things that Sirius and Remus had said. "He's in pain," Hermione whispered, breaking his train of thought. "What?" "Look at him," Hermione said, leaning over. "Something's wrong." When Harry looked, he didn't understand how he could have missed it. LaSalle didn't look well. There were beads of perspiration on his forehead and under his nose. And on the whole, he was quite disheveled. His hair wasn't brushed all the way through. He hadn't put on his usual sash over his robes. "Potter!" The sudden exclamation caused Harry to jump. "You and Miss Granger seem to be off on your own little subject. Mind sharing with the class?" Harry gulped. "It's just, you're acting different," Hermione volunteered. "We're wondering what's wrong. Are you all right, Professor?" LaSalle seemed a little taken aback by the question. It was evident he wasn't expecting such a response, and was a little bit awkward in knowing how to reply. He opened his mouth and closed it again. "Are you okay, Professor?" Lavender asked. "You're acting like old Professor Snape." At this, the professor leaned heavily against the desk and gripped the edge of it tightly. "No, I'm not well," he finally admitted. "Now pick up your things. I'll see you on Monday." The class gathered their books, which they didn't bring with them, so it doesn't matter.
I was just going to say the same thing. What books? The ones you didn't bring?
"I wonder if I still have a detention," Harry heard Dean say as they were leaving. "Harry, wait," the professor called out, stopping him in his tracks. Harry whirled around. LaSalle had collapsed into a chair. "Come here." The last of class had left. Harry stood nervously before LaSalle. "I need you to go into my office. You'll find a bottle with blue powder on the mantel." Harry noticed that he was having difficulty breathing. "Throw some into the fireplace and ask for Snape's office. Stick your head in and tell him that I need him immediately. If he's not there, try the apartment." Harry nodded and headed out of the room. Why did the professor have to ask him to fetch Snape? He shook slightly as he reached for the powder on the mantel, and he was the last person that Snape would want poking his head unexpectedly into his office.
He said it was blue powder.
Yes.
I wonder if they have special blue powder for inside Hogwarts that only goes within the Hogwarts grounds. That would only go to the other offices.
Maybe, because I don't think that they talk about flue powder at all as part of the castle aspect until the 5th book with Professor Umbridge, and she has regular flue powder.
Right, but she also uses it to go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And they use flue powder because they turned on access to the flues.
Yes.
For the 5th years and under to come back that holiday. But then she was monitoring them because that's how Sirius kept getting to talk to them.
In the 3rd book, I don't remember it particularly well, but when Harry got caught sneaking back from Hogsmeade by Snape, weren't they in Snape's office and he then called Lupin?
Ooh. He might have called Lupin.
Hold on, let me go grab my book. All right, so we just went out of our way, pulled out the books and our audio recordings of the books.
Yep, and we searched different chapters, and yes, it is regular flue powder that they use in the castle in the books.
Oh, I was going to read you the passage back to the book on the floor. Hang on. Would have been better if I hadn't thrown the book on the floor.
Yeah, because we had it queued up.
"So," Snape said softly, "we'll see about this." He strode across to the fire, seized a fistful of glittering powder from a jar on the fireplace, and threw it into the flames. "Lupin," he called into the fire, "I want a word." It was rather strange. His first thought was of a giraffe, as it seemed he was stretching his neck through the network of flues. When his head finally stopped, he found himself looking into Snape's office. He was seated at his desk, leaning over a deck of cards, rapidly turning them over. Harry swallowed hard. Excuse me, Professor. Snape whirled around. Potter, what are you doing? He sounded slightly angry. Mine sounded more than slightly angry.
I liked it.
He sounded slightly angry, and yet somehow frightened by the intrusion. He struck Harry as being strangely jumpy. Professor LaSalle told me to get you? Snape pushed the cards aside and stood angrily. He's sick, isn't he? Yes, he is, Harry replied. Shoving the chair aside, he grabbed a goblet and a bottle of some smoking yellow liquid. Get out of my way, Potter. For a moment, Harry was somewhat uncertain as to what he was supposed to do, but rather than ask Snape, he forced himself to pull back and found his head rushing back towards his body. He barely had time to stumble away from the fireplace when Snape came stepping through. Professor Snape didn't even look at him as he stormed by towards the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom. Harry followed, far behind to retrieve his things. If you take this like I told you to, you wouldn't be having this problem, Snape was scolding. LaSalle was leaning sickly over his desk as Snape poured some of the liquid into the goblet. I think I'm going to need you to step in for me tomorrow for the Quidditch match, he said wearily. No, Snape said, pushing the goblet toward him. If you take this 3 times today, you should be fine tomorrow. The goblet was steaming, and Harry got a perturbed whiff of it. LaSalle had grabbed it and was grimacing. He took a swig and immediately began coughing violently. Damn it, Sev, this stuff burns. You know it will help. Or kill me. Snape suddenly noticed Harry. Potter, get out of here! Wait, LaSalle said, putting down the goblet. He grabbed the edge of Harry's robes to stop him. Thank you, Harry. I just couldn't ask any of the other students. You understand. They can't know what's going on. But Harry didn't hear much of it. It was as if someone had just touched a hot poker to his head. It was quick, but it made him cringe and place a hand to his forehead. Neither Snape nor LaSalle seemed to have noticed. Potter, please leave us. And you, he turned back to LaSalle. I want to see you finish drinking that. I will not take over your Quidditch duties if you choose not to take all of it.
Fair.
Harry saw LaSalle once again pick up the goblet as he hurried from the room. The scar on his head was still pulsing from the bout of pain. It was the first time it had hurt since last year, and the thought of it frightened him. The weather Saturday was not too bad. It was cloudy, which would mean they wouldn't have to play with the sun in their eyes. The only bad thing was there was a light rain coming down. Harry stood out on the field, shivering in the rain with the rest of the team. The Slytherins had not yet arrived. The crowd was beginning to grumble. If they don't come, we win, George said hopefully. Where's Professor LaSalle? Harry looked around and hoped he was coming. He wasn't ready to have Professor Snape referee the game. I sure hope I get to see a game. Harry turned at the sound of Fudge's voice. Minister, he said, sorry that you're having to wait. We don't know where the Slytherins are. Ah, yes, Gryffindors versus Slytherins. Always promises to be a good game.
Why is Fudge on the field?
I don't know. Why is he on the field?
Oy.
Harry didn't want to talk to Fudge. He didn't want to talk to anyone at the moment, besides someone who could tell him what was going on. Malfoy was making him furious. He began to hope for a forfeit. That was the moment you began to hope for a forfeit, not like 5 minutes ago when George says, if they don't come, we win.
Right. Well, because he got distracted by talking to Fudge.
Harry, I need to speak to you after the game, Fudge said lowly.
Okay. That's never good.
Nope. Good morning, Cornelius. Dumbledore walked up from behind them and stood before Fudge. From the tone in his voice and the look in his eyes, he was not happy at all. Dumbledore, Fudge took a step back and placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. You've been extremely difficult to contact over the summer. As Harry watched them, he realized there seemed to be a second conversation taking place between them. one much deeper than the one on the surface. He could feel Fudge's grip on his shoulder getting tighter. There are many questions left unanswered about last year's events at the school that left one student dead. I believe I have the answers to those questions, Dumbledore answered. And there has been more than enough proof over the summer. I believe many of your Aurors still have their hands full. Still, there are some things that I wish to sort out. Fudge released his grip on Harry and patted his shoulder. I'm requesting that you allow me to question Mr. Potter. Harry barely took notice that the Slytherins had come onto the field. Didn't Fudge call him a liar last time? He felt extremely uncomfortable. Dumbledore crossed his arms. I'm sorry, Minister, but I'd rather not have Harry leave the grounds. I don't believe you understand, Fudge drawled. I am not merely making a request, I am demanding to see him. There are questions that it is imperative we have answers to. Now, it will only be for a few hours, and we can arrange him to come on a weekend. You may also have a professor accompany him if you wish. However, if you come, you will not be allowed to be present when we question him. And why is that? Dumbledore did not seem happy at all. We wish not to have you pressure him into saying anything or leaving something out.
First of all, Harry wouldn't. Harry would probably feel the most comfortable with Dumbledore there.
True. What is there to leave out? Harry finally spoke. Voldemort's back. Fudge cringed at the name. He killed Cedric, tried to kill me. What else do you want to know? Frankly, there's a lot, Fudge replied. Don't worry, Harry. You're not in trouble. The Diggers are some of those who want answers. Don't you wish to help Cedric's parents? Dumbledore stepped closer to Harry. I will give it consideration, as will Harry, but it will be his decision, and I dare say this is not the time or place to discuss this, he added sternly.
First of all, Harry already discussed everything with the Diggories and tried to give them his winnings from the Triwizard Tournament because they were half Cedric's. And they're like, nope, you keep these, child. Thank you for telling us what happened to our son.
You're like making such dramatic faces at me. But yes. Very well, but remember this. Fudge turned to head back to the bleachers. I could still have you removed as headmaster. And then he walked away, passing Professor LaSalle and Snape, who exchanged glares. What does he want? Snape asked. He wishes to question Harry about last year, Dumbledore said with a sigh. He wants to take him to the ministry, LaSalle furrowed his brow. Why would he need him? Snape asked. What's Fudge up to that he needs to pull a student from school? There seemed to be a hint of loathing in his voice.
Wow, Snape, I agree with you. Shock.
Yes, we know what happened last time a student was pulled for questioning, LaSalle said bitterly. Enough of this talk. Dumbledore put up his hand. Harry, play a good game. We'll discuss this later. His team was summoning him, and he left Dumbledore for his huddled teammates. He told himself not to think about what was just said and instead set his mind on the game. After all, he had been waiting for so long to play. He gripped his fireball, looked determinedly over at Malfoy, and leaned into the huddle. I think we'll have the advantage in this game, he said in a hushed voice. I believe Malfoy is going to think he can cheat. But McGonagall said, I heard what she said, Harry explained quickly. I trust LaSalle to make him follow the rules, especially with Fudge in the audience. He removed his glasses and wiped the rain from them, took out his wand, and placed a water-repelling charm on them. So be careful. You've watched the Slytherins play before. Haven't you, Dennis? Dennis nodded and clutched his broomstick tighter to him. Be careful, Harry cautioned. All of you. They may start playing really dirty. Captains, are your teams ready? Professor LaSalle sat hovering a few feet over the field on a broom, his fur-lined cape wrapped tightly around him. Both Harry and Malfoy stepped forward. Then shake, and we'll begin. Harry stepped toward Malfoy and tried his best to hide his disgust. They took each other's extended hand and squeezed. Harry hoped that his grip was stronger than Malfoy's, though he had a fairly strong hand himself. That will be enough, LaSalle said softly as he watched them attempting to pop the blood from each other's fingers. They let go, and Malfoy sneered. I'll beat you this time, Potter. Have a safe flight. He chuckled and headed back to his team. Ready? LaSalle was opening the box containing balls. Let the game begin. Harry watched as the golden snitch burst from its enclosure and fluttered off. He kicked off the ground hard as he soared upward above the game. Malfoy followed, leveled out a few meters away. He made a rude hand gesture, and Harry returned it, then focused attention on finding the snitch. He wished he could find it now and shove it in Malfoy's face. The Gryffindor chasers were already doing a fine job, and he heard Lee Jordan exclaim, Would you look at that? The Gryffindors already have a score. Just seconds into the game. Will there be a game at all? Seems like the Slytherins still haven't arrived yet. What are you doing? Malfoy screamed down at his teammates. Go after those girls! Harry searched even harder for the snitch. Now would be the perfect time for it to show. While Malfoy wasn't paying attention, he noticed that the players were suddenly rushing towards the Gryffindor goals. Brian Bucklehurst, newest and youngest player on the Slytherin team, has the quaffle and is moving fast. Oh yes, nice save, Creevey. Oh, what was that? Why, you dirty little warlock. Professor LaSalle is calling a timeout. One of those dirty Slytherin snakes hit Katie Bell with their beater paddle. Foul! Harry heard mumbling from the announcer and supposed it was McGonagall, reprimanding Lee. As he and Malfoy landed on the field, he hurried over to where Katie sat holding the side of her face. It was an accident, Malfoy exclaimed, striding up to Professor LaSalle. I don't want to hear it, Draco, LaSalle replied. Yes, Poppy. Is she going to be all right? She'll just be a little bruised, Madame Pomfrey replied as she held her wand up to Katie Bell's face. I say they should forfeit, George yelled. Shut up, Weasley, it was an accident, Malfoy countered.
There's no accidents, Malfoy. Not when the Slytherins are playing Quidditch.
No. Stop arguing, LaSalle ordered, or I'll call a foul on both teams. He turned to Malfoy. Draco, you better start playing a cleaner game starting now, or I will have the Slytherins forfeit to Gryffindor. But it was an accident. Do you want me to let them take 2 penalty shots? Malfoy looked shocked. But LaSalle threw him a warning look. Penalty shot. Now let's get back to the game. Are you in, Miss Bell? Katie stood up and nodded. Okay then, back in the air. He blew the whistle. They kicked off once again, took their position to take a penalty shot. Katie scored it.
Because Katie's the best.
Good shot, Jordan's voice boomed. 60-0. Serves you right. Sorry, Professor. Gryffindor's lead. Harry went back to searching for the snitch. Malfoy followed him, and he leaned forward on his firebolt to lose him. But suddenly he noticed what Malfoy had. Father got me a firebolt too, Potter, Malfoy said proudly. Found the Draco voice again. Yes!
I love it. Yes!
Takes a couple lines to get there.
I love it.
Get lost, said Harry. He desperately looked around for a glint of gold. Fat chance I can keep up with you now. Draco voice.
It's amazing.
I love it so much.
I have a very distinct sassy Harry voice, but I love your Draco voice. It is amazing. Just amazing.
Harry cussed irritably under his breath. Then he remembered something. The Wonsky feint. Images of the Irish seeker plowing into the turf came to his mind. He imagined Malfoy smacking into the ground instead of smiling. Here comes Bucklehurst again, Jordan was saying. Looks like the Slytherins have finally realized that not all their players have to be oversized trolls. Oh no, he scored.
Creevey! Dennis! You're better than this.
Good job, Brian, Malfoy screamed. Kick those Gryffindors! Harry went into a dive. Malfoy noticed and went swooping down after him, desperately looking for the snitch. There was no snitch, and Harry held back so Malfoy could catch up. They were plummeting towards the ground at an astonishing rate. Look, Jordan cried. The Seekers have seen the Oh, just feet from the ground, Harry pulled up, missing the turf by inches, but Malfoy was too late. It was the Wonsky feint, just like Crumb, Jordan exclaimed loudly. And poor Malfoy, that had to hurt. Harry landed and looked on as Madame Malfoy tried to weed her way through the Slytherin team who had crowded around Malfoy. He hadn't gotten up yet. Everyone back, LaSalle ordered. The Slytherins parted for him. Draco, are you okay? There was no answer, and suddenly, Harry's feeling of triumph melted. What if he had seriously hurt him? What if... Potter broke my broom! Malfoy suddenly screamed. Harry's teammates had gathered around him. If he's concerned about that, then he must be all right, Angelina commented. Professor LaSalle had finally managed to clear a good area around Malfoy when Harry and his team got a glimpse of him. They cringed at once. He had a split lip and what looked to be a broken nose. Fred and George turned around. Way to go, Potter. You got him good. And they raised a hand for a high five. Harry, if you were anyone else, I'd feel bad, but I'll admit that serves him right, Alicia commented. Good job. Harry decided to step closer to see what was to happen next with the game. LaSalle had a hold of Malfoy's broom and was busy mending it with his staff while Madame Pomfrey was mending Malfoy. That was a foul! Malfoy exclaimed to Professor LaSalle. Yes, LaSalle agreed.
I don't think the Wronski feint is a foul. That is a play.
What? Harry called out. Was not. Now don't you argue with me, Harry, LaSalle said as he finished fixing Malfoy's fireball. Where what you did was very skillful, your intention was to cause Mr. Malfoy harm. But I did the Wonsky feint. Yes, you did, and very well too, but your intentions were no different than of the beater who hit Katie. The Wonsky feint isn't illegal, Harry argued. Yes, it is. Harry couldn't believe this. But you taught Victor Crumb. And I called a foul whenever he did it. Harry looked over and saw Malfoy looking daggers at him. We should get 2 penalty shots. That was a lousy trick Potter did. You'll receive 1, LaSalle replied simply, but only 1. Malfoy looked even more furious. You'll regret this, Potter. My father.
Yeah, all right.
Professor LaSalle turned sharply. Gave me permission to use corporal punishment on you, he interrupted. Now enough, Draco. Don't make me embarrass you any more than you already are. For once, Draco looked at a loss for words. Harry had to turn away, and most of his teammates were grinning. Penalty shot to Slytherin. There was a booing from the Gryffindor side of the stands, and Lee Jordan was voicing his complaints. Don't worry, Fred said, patting Harry on the back before they took off. It was worth it to see Malfoy rearrange his face in the mud. They soared in the air, and once again Harry took his place as lookout. Malfoy joined him. You will regret this. Hope your face doesn't swell up too much, Harry replied. Though purple does go well with green. He heard Malfoy swear. Brian Bucklehurst made the shot. Harry didn't blame Creevey. However, Bucklehurst was better than he wanted to admit. They'd have to watch him in the future. Then he saw it. Glittering over some of the Slytherin spectators was the snitch. He glanced over at Malfoy, who was still busy cursing, and decided to run for it. He shot down quickly. There was a whooshing sound behind him, and he knew Malfoy was hot on his tail. But he had had a head start. The Slytherin looked above them and pointed at it, screaming. The roar of the crowds sounded in his ears as he came upon it. The Slytherins were booing. Some of them even threw cockroach clusters at him as his fingers closed around the snitch. He held it high for everyone, and Malfoy, to see, and soared out of reach of the Slytherin crowd. He felt his heart fluttering as fast as the snitch's wings, as the noise of the cheering crowd gave him a rush. And then he was hit by something. He was taken by complete surprise as he fell from his broom, and he got a glimpse of a malevolent-looking Malfoy with a wand in hand.
Rude, Malfoy!
Harry was falling fast and had been extremely high off the ground. He looked desperately at his teammates who were rushing towards him. Insanely enough, he realized that he was still madly clutching the snitch. Then he felt a firm hand grab onto him, but at the same time his scar exploded with pain. The hand let go, but quickly caught him again. His scar hurt so badly that he let go of the snitch and heard himself yell out. He was dropped roughly onto the ground and just lay on the wet grass, letting the rain beat onto his face as he waited for the pain to recede. When he opened his eyes, he saw the worried faces of his teammates, and a few feet away, he also saw Professor LaSalle kneeling on the ground. He was clutching at a hand that looked to have been seriously burned.
Ooh!
Wonder if I was right.
What? No, because after the fourth, Voldemort can touch him.
Oh, that's right.
Because he has Harry's blood inside of him. I like that we were both on the same wavelength, though.
End of chapter 7.
What? That's bonkers. That was a twist I didn't see coming.
Well, like, I don't understand why. I mean, we'll have to wait and see how this turns out. But, like, I don't understand why it would burn him. Like, I don't get it.
I don't either.
Unless they're going to go a different direction with, like, why
It could,
why Harry's protections caused Voldemort the pain and the burning. I don't know.
What if LaSalle was there?
That night?
Yeah.
Maybe.
What if that's when LaSalle was there? What if LaSalle killed Harry's parents?
But then why would it burn Voldemort? Well, I mean, Voldemort's just evil.
Well, what if LaSalle killed James?
There we go.
And then he was there, so he also was hit with
The protective.
Yeah.
I like it. I guess.
Because this is the first time LaSalle's touched Harry but this chapter.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my. Because LaSalle wasn't a Death Eater, but apparently it sounds like he has a dark mark.
Yes. Well, I guess we'll see.
We'll have to wait and see. You guys are on this wild ride with us.
All right. See you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you so much for joining us on our journey through the trap door.
Please leave us a review on Facebook or iTunes. It would literally mean the world to us.
It really would.
You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Through the Trapdoor 16 or on Twitter at The Trapdoor.
And please send us an email at throughthetrapdoor16@gmail.com with any story suggestions. And as always, join us again next Saturday as we travel through the trapdoor.